Coming up in this episode, we've now managed to manhandle the engine onto the motorcycle bench, so this is actually really quite handy. Dual purpose, works for the bikes and works well for putting the engines on. I'm really looking forward to stripping this down and having a good look at what's gone on inside. So what I'm going to start by doing is just jacking the engine back up using the engine crane. I'm going to drain out the gearbox fluid and then pop the sump bung back in there. I'm also going to drain the torque converter if it's got a little drain bung on there. And then what that'll allow me to do is undo the torque converter, and then I can split the transmission from the engine and take the torque converter out at the same time, move them out of the way so they can be cleaned and dealt with later. Then we can make a start on looking to disassemble all of the bits and pieces on the engine, so it's that bit lighter and easier to move around when it's on the engine stand. Also, we can get all the turbo and stuff like that off as part of the other ancillaries. I wasn't able to access some of the bolts underneath here, so now that it's out of the car, it's going to be that bit easier. So we get started with jacking it back up and draining that oil out. So I've just got the oil draining away there in a bucket. And if we just have a quick look under this transmission cooler pipe there, there's a rubber bung. And basically you remove that in order to be able to access the torque converter bolts. You've also got a sight hole there, I believe. I'll grab those bolts in a minute because they're buried in there. All looks to be nice and loose now. Bring that down. Catch. I bet these are great fun in the car. Undo that other bracket as well that's tucked down there. Just give us a bit more access then. Get it on the move. There we go. So that's the turbo unit out of the way. Oh, there goes the gasket. I just loosened off the tensioner there if you couldn't quite see what I was doing, and that's going to allow me to take the belt off, which I've just done, and then pop that alternator off. I think the starter motor itself might actually be dead as well, so I'm going to make a note on my parts list to either test it or replace it. I might end up replacing it just because it is buried, and I think probably where somebody's tried to turn the car over when it flooded, I think they've probably just damaged the starter motor. So there it is, just tucked in there. And then on the back of the gearbox here, so where the starter is there, I've just got the two big mounting bolts that bolt that on. So I'll remove those. Again, that probably would have been quite the challenge when trying to do it in the car, because that was buried. Certainly see some signs of water in there. What I'll do is I'll grab a torch and we can have a quick look with the camera and see if you can get a closer look in the exhaust ports there. So hopefully, as you can see there, it's quite evident we've had some water going in there when you compare it to the cylinder next to it. A little bit there and a tiny little bit in there. It's a bit difficult to show, but yeah, I'll carry on stripping it down, but I just thought it was worth showing you what we could see through the exhaust manifold ports. So that's all of the bell housing bolts out, but I've just left one just to hold it together. That is loose, but it's just to hold it together for a second. What I'm going to do, tidy the tools away that I've got just placed down here, and then I'm going to just make sure the engine jack, as you can see, the engine's not held, or the weight's not being taken of the engine by the jack. So I'm just going to make sure that I take some weight off of the engine, because it's likely that when I pull this away, this is going to want to disappear down that way. So I just want to get that all in place, so if it does decide to move, the most of the weight is taken by the crane, so hopefully it won't disappear onto the floor. What I haven't been able to do as well is access, as I mentioned earlier, the torque converter bolts and drain the torque converter. So I'm going to put a bucket underneath, but I imagine when I pull this off, it's going to make quite a mess. The last one, it's on the move. So's the engine though, which isn't all that helpful. Just checking as well that I'm not putting too much strain on the cooler pipes as well. Lovely, quite the mess. I can see the torque converter drain bung now though, although it was right at the top here, so we were never going to get to that. Let's stand that up on its end there so it doesn't leak any more oil out. Hopefully I can use the seized engine to my advantage and undo these. Just be careful as well when you take these off, because the torque converters can actually be quite heavy, so just bear that in mind. So we've now taken the torque converter off the back of the engine. I've popped that out the way and I've moved the gearbox out the way. We've spun the engine round so you can now see the other side, and what I'm going to focus on doing now that I've had a clear up is taking off some more bits. So power steering pump, the aircon pump, the EGR cooler, some wiring, and just more bits and pieces just to strip it down so that we can access the rest of the engine that little bit easier, and when it's on the stand it's not going to be quite so heavy. So that's what I'm going to get cracking with now. So yeah, we'll carry on with that. So just need to pop the larger aircon pipe off just so that I can gain access to the back power steering pipe, or power steering bolt for the pump, sorry. So that's now the power steering pump and aircon pump out the way. I've just got this water pipe as well out the way. So I've put all the bolts in there that hold all of that lot in, and I'm just going to put that lot to one side out the way, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Looks like there's quite a lot of water that's sat on the wrong side of this EGR cooler by the looks of it. It's sat in this EGR pipe. So as you can see there, just in that EGR pipe there, looks like we've got Bit of water that's dried out in there. So that's the EGR cooler assembly. So that's all off, now out the way. So the engine strip down's coming along really nicely. What I'll do is I'll grab the camera and just give you a close-up so you can see a few more bits and pieces a bit closer. And then what I'll do as well is I'll just show you what we've got on the bench so you can see how we're laying it out and the reasons why I put the bolts and bits and pieces back in the components or back in the engine when I'm working. So as you can see, I'm just laying all of the bits and pieces out. I'll give them all a good clean before I put them all back on there, but I'm just laying it all out here. And then I've just got all of the nuts and bolts as I go that I've just popped back in. So like this one here, this one down there. The gearbox bolts are all in a bag then. It just makes it so much easier when you're trying to put these things back together. You're not there with a pile of bolts thinking, where did any of these go? So I'm just unplugging all of these wiring clips just to give a bit more slack on the engine wiring loom. Oh, lots of carbon goodness. Trying to wiggle all this pipe out. So as you can see, that's all the inlet tracked and then down to the boost hose there. So I'm going to pop that out of the way. Looking at that side, it doesn't look as if a conrod's tried to escape this side either, so that's good. So I need to start tackling the wiring loom here, so I'm just going to work my way round trying to unpick all of this. It's just a case of taking all the electrical connectors off. There's quite a lot of like plastic little clips that hold the wiring harness in place along the way. So I'm just unplugging all of those as well. There is a bolt there which I need to get to. Yes, look at that. That's good to get that out of the way. Makes life a lot easier when you're just trying to work around things. As you can see, it's a lot more simplistic now, where it's not full of wires everywhere. So we should, in theory, be able now to access all of the inlet manifold bolts to undo all of those. Although saying that, no, we can. Yeah, no, we can do that. So we take the inlet manifold off next, I think. So I'm just undoing the high pressure fuel line that just comes from the high pressure pump up to the rail. And then, only because that's got two little brackets which are on the inlet manifold, and I just thought if I undo those instead, that way, I'll just take all of this lot off in one go with the pipe. That's the theory anyway. There we go. Oh, lovely. Ooh, they are brutal, them clips. Perfectly poised and ready to have your finger. So the plan, if this works, is just to take this whole water pump housing off in one go. If it works. Perfect, more fluid. Aha. Oh, got a little breather there. I'm just going to quickly loosen these clamps that hold these transmission cooler pipes on. Then that way I can pull all the transmission cooler out of the way and the pipework itself, and then I'll just leave the brackets where they are so that I don't lose those. So I've just spun the engine 90 degrees, and that's given me access to the starter motor ring gear or the flex disc. So what I'm going to do now is undo these Torx bolts here, and then that'll allow me to pull this off and out of the way. And then I just need to go ahead and look for some longer bolts than the bolts that go through the gearbox into the back of the engine here, because they're not long enough to go through the engine stand. So I need to see if I can find some longer ones for those. I need 4 of them just so I can then mount that part on the engine stand, and then we can look at getting it on the stand. And that'll allow us to sort of flip the engine over and gain access to the sump properly. So we've now managed to pop the engine onto the engine stand. I've also put a protective covering over the floor, just so that if I am spinning it around and getting oil here, there and everywhere, I'm just not making a complete mess, fingers crossed. So what I'm going to do now is we'll flip the engine over and we're going to whip the sump off, because I'm sure that you're just as eagerly awaiting as I am to see what's going on with this thing. So yeah, we'll flip it over, pop the sump off, and hopefully we'll be able to find out a bit more about what's going on inside. Lovely. Now with the sump off, we're just going to take all of the bolts out that seem to hold this bottom chest kind of piece. So we're just going to take that out of the way, and then that'll give us a bit of a better view as to what's going on a bit further down. Now I'm going to just use 2 of these little M10 or M8 bolts, sorry, here, and you just wind these in here on the sides there, and then hopefully that should help gently lift up this chest piece here off the bottom of the engine. Just found a couple of longer bolts, so I'll use these, and then hopefully they'll be right out the way. And what we're going to do is we're just really going to gently and evenly just wind both of these up. And I don't know if you can quite make that out, but it's just, let me move the camera back. It's just starting to move that there. So as you can see, it's just starting to lift the part of this chest here. So we're just doing it nice and even, as not to damage anything. I'm just ever so gently, I've got a gasket scraper here, I'm just ever so gently going to put it in the back of the chest, just so that I can just gently ease that up evenly like so. Then that's broken all of the sealant free there. Oh, I can see some broken bits. I'll grab the camera and you can have a look, but I don't know where that bit's come from, but it's certainly not looking good. So if we take a look just there, that piece is meant to be attached to something. So we got that bit there. Just gently lay that there. We've also got another piece here. So I'm going to just pop them up out the way. And then, if we have a look there, let me see if I can make that out on the camera. So guys, I don't know if you can quite see that there. Let me just see if I can get the torch shining behind it. But there we have it. We have got a broken rod in there. So that has snapped off down there, but it also looks as if where it's bounced around, it's damaged just in between, down where that piston is in the cylinder there. It looks as if it's smashed the side off of that as well, where it's all bounced around. Right, I've managed to get the engine back onto the engine stand, albeit a bit suspect, but yeah, we've managed to do that, which is great. So now I'm just going to take these 2 bolts back out this bottom assembly here, and then because we no longer have this chest in the way, we should be able to just pull this right up out the way. I am trying to sort of keep it as clean as I go, or keep it as clean as I can as I go, which is easier said than done, because every time I rotate the thing over it pours oil everywhere. But that's why I started in the beginning with this matting on the floor, and also just laying down rags and plenty of just stuff to try and soak up the oil as we go. As I say, try and keep it as clean as possible. I will be looking in the long term to clean all of this, clean all the garage and sort of start again, as it were. So now we can lift that up and out the way. So as you can now see there on the top side, up on this side here, we've got a nice cutout. As I was trying to show you earlier, we've got obviously the con rod there and the nice cutout where the con rod can come right up when the piston's at the top of the stroke. And as you can see here, we no longer have that. and we just have that snapped off bit of rod which is stuck in there. And then again the same for these other ones, they're all okay. So that missing chunk of metal that we had, somewhere like that. So I've just laid that in there so you can see where that's normally meant to live. I don't think that JB Weld or a bit of No More Nails or some quick steel is going to resolve that one. So as you can see there, looking lovely. This one's still got a nice bit of water in there. Now that we know that this engine's not going to be repairable, or at least the bottom end isn't going to be because of that damage that we've seen, where we've got so much water in the cylinders, it's probably damaged all the pistons and the piston rings, and also we've got that broken com rod as well. So what I am going to do is go away and look at my options, see whether it's going to be more beneficial to go and get a used complete engine, or whether it's going to be a case of sourcing the bits that I need to try and rebuild what I have to make a good engine out of all of the bits that we've got. The concerns I have with obviously going and buying a second-hand engine is, or a complete second-hand engine, is obviously, you know, where that's all together, you don't always know the history of those, so it can be a bit of a gamble, and it may make more sense for us to rebuild something so that we know we've got a nice fresh engine that we're putting in the car. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go away and, as I say, do some homework and see what I can do. So on that note, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.